how religious beliefs can influence the way you see the world. Okay? Now, I'm talking about emotion, not talking about beliefs. I'm talking about how your emotional state affects how you interact with other people.
Let's say if you always be like, if you like always a misfit, and then when it comes to someone actually want to help you, then you act different, or some kind of.
So do any of you know people who seem like they're angry all the time? Okay. Or people who are really anxious, you know, and so sort of think that everyone is out to get them, things like that. I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify. These can be very complex, emotional situations. But the point I'm trying to make is that we can change our brains. Okay, we can choose what we want to exercise in our brains. And now I'm going to take a leap and say, based on what I know of what's been shown scientifically with animal experiments in particular, I think that we have the power that we can change the balance of negative and positive thinking that we approach the world with. I think the fact that someone mentioned that if you're always staying in negativity, then you tend to see the world in a negative way. If you tend to focus on positive things, you tend to see the world in a positive way. I believe, based on the science, that that's probably because the kinds of thoughts we have and the pathways that we choose to exercise actually influence the structure of the brain and the way our synapses work. Okay? So I really want you to think about yourselves as masters of your synapses, you know? I want you to think of yourselves as masters of your synapses. You can choose what pathways in the brain I want to strengthen and which ones I'd rather were not so strong. Okay? For me, that means thinking positively, being generous. I want to try and not exercise my negative thinking. And that's the lesson I'd like you to take away from this. You are masters of your synapses. Okay? Choose wisely the pathways that you choose to exercise, and the ones to which you say, I think you ought to stay quiet. Okay? It can really change your life. Okay, so I'm going to end with that, and then we have some time left for any questions. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay. Going back in your early in the lecture, you were talking about the imbalance in the brain,
Yes.
mental disorders.
Yes.
Let's say if the person is diagnosed with 4 or 5 mental disorders,
Okay.
but they can function without medication in society. How is that possible if they being diagnosed? And I really saw the person is I know this person very well, and he's like acting like a normal person who would not know that person has this kind of disorder. Well, he does not take medication.
So you're talking about someone who's been diagnosed with various psychiatric disorders, who's able to function in society without medication.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd say good for them. I'd say congratulations. I mean, I'm serious. I think that's because, the brain, remember, synapses can be modified. Okay? So the brain has a tremendous capacity to compensate. Okay? The brain has a tremendous capacity to compensate. We know, for example, that people who lose their eyesight, right, what happens to their other senses?
They get stronger.
They get stronger. Well, how do you think that works?
Because synapses are down.
Synapses, okay? They lose the use of their visual system, so synapses become stronger in the other sensory pathways, okay? So it's possible that this person has found ways to compensate. It depends on the severity of the illness. Other questions? So, yes.
What is reflexive?
By reflective pathway, I mean that this pathway that goes through the cortex before going back to amygdala, which is able to reflect on whether or not it's a rope or a snake, really, with high resolution, really look carefully and make that decision, and then tell the amygdala whether or not it's safe. Okay. So, what kind of pathways do you want to strengthen in your brains? All of them. Okay. So, how would you strengthen all of your pathways? Yes, question.
Yeah, it didn't really have to do with this part, but like towards the beginning when you were talking about the neurons, like the myelin and all that, I don't know what's the process again, like you go to the exon and the myelin.
So how does myelin affect the function of an axon?
So like the process of everything within like the electrical things and the energy and all this stuff. The process is one.
Yeah, so remember that this is from one of the medical student lectures, that the myelin protects the neurons so that the electrical energy doesn't leak out, so the action potentials move faster. It's like an insulator around the axon, like insulating a wire. Okay. Afterwards, if you want, we can talk in more detail. Okay. So which pathways do you want to strengthen? All of them. Okay.
I would ask that you would talk about maybe how you got to working at case and your pathway to becoming the doctor you are today.
How did I get here? Which synapses did I exercise? Good question. So it turns out that ever since I was a little kid, I loved biology. I just loved biology. I remember when I was 7 years old, I started to write a book. I wrote one page. But it was a book about life in a drop of water from a pond. Because I was fascinated by everything, paramecia and amoebas and all those single-celled animals that could be living in one drop of water from a pond. So I just loved biology from, very early on. And I, had fish at home and lizards and all that kind of stuff that made my mom roll her eyes. So then when I was in college, I continued to pursue biology. And I had a course in neurobiology, biology of the brain and nervous system. And it was taught by two really extraordinary teachers. And that course is what made me decide that of all the things in biology that one could study, I thought the brain was the most fascinating. And so that's what made me decide to go to graduate school and get a PhD in neurobiology. And that's what started me on my path. Any other questions? Yes?
When medical schools, when you apply for a medical school, does it really matter what previous undergrad school you went to? Do they look at that?
When you apply for medical school, does it matter which college or university you went to? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's several things that go into the package of what's evaluated. Okay. Certainly your grades. Okay. Your MCAT scores.